Hello everyone and welcome! The 124 scale RC Firebird drift missile is back on the bench. In today's video, I'll be finishing up this project by installing all of the interior components that I printed in the last video and adding a few final details to make the car complete. This is a project I've been working on for quite a while now, and I'm really excited to see this car completed, and I can't wait to show you all the result. If you're new to this project, I'll be sure to post a link to the playlist below in the description if you'd like to watch the videos that I've posted previously. But with that said, let's pick up where we left off in the last video and begin the final steps to getting this car completed. As you might recall from the last video, I custom designed and 3D printed a bunch of parts for the interior, including a steering wheel, gauges, and racing seat. My goal is to give the interior more of a custom purpose-built drift car look rather than the stock appearance that it currently has. I think that the items that I designed will really help transform the appearance without requiring a ton of work. I was a little worried that I might have a hard time removing the stock steering wheel since I want to replace it with the racing wheel that I 3D printed, but fortunately it came right off without an issue. Before I could install these parts, I needed to apply some paint first. I painted everything that you see here, including the interior tub. For some parts, such as the seat, I applied several thick coats of primer to help smooth out the 3D printed layers. There were a few items that I chose to paint by hand, including the radiator and dash panels. I thought about painting the custom dash panels black, but I decided to paint them chrome silver to make them stand out more. I'm really glad I made that choice because they ended up looking great inside the car. So I realized that there were still two items that I wanted to add to the car, that being a rear view mirror, and also in the last video somebody suggested adding a fire extinguisher, which I thought was a really good idea. This rear view mirror here came out of a '69 Camaro model kit. The Firebird model kit was pre-built when I got off of eBay originally. Didn't have a rear view mirror, so I'm gonna clean this one up a little bit with some sandpaper and throw it in. Once again, I used several thick coats of primer to help smooth the surface of the fire extinguisher. Later, I'll be painting it red. Here's a look at the painting progress so far. I did a little work on both the racing seat and fire extinguisher and sanded them before applying paint. Taking the extra time to apply primer and sand these parts really helps to make them look better. I have tons of black plasti dip sitting around the shop, so that's what I used to paint the seats. It gave it a nice texture and look. Back over on the bench, I wanted to do a little work on the interior tub. After applying the flat black paint, mostly to paint the 3D printed cover that I added in the last video, I thought it looked a little too nice and uniform, so I washed the interior with some black paint and used a Scotch-Brite pad to roughen up a few sections just to make the interior look a little rough and worn. While I had the black paint out, I also grimed up the radiator. So I think at this point I'm going to go ahead and install the tachometer. I actually made some really small holes in the back of it, and this is just some extruded 3D printer filament, 0.25 millimeter. So I'm going to take some of this and put it in the back for wiring. It's going to be tedious, but it should look pretty cool sitting on the dash. As tedious as it was to add this tachometer, it looks great sitting on the dash, especially with the wires. Speaking of tedious, next I painted all of the little switches and gauges. Kind of a pain, but the result looked awesome. The next items that needed some paint were the steering wheel and rear view mirror. I once again used chrome silver to add detail to both of these parts. I glued the steering wheel in and worked a little magic with some red paint. The racing seat turned out great. I just wanted to add a few flat black details before installing both seats in the car along with the roll cage. Of course, I can't forget about the rear view mirror. While I had the glue out, I also glued the motor cover onto the motor. At this point, the glue on the interior was dry and it looks awesome. I'm very pleased with how this interior turned out. Before I begin the somewhat arduous task of putting this car back together, I plugged in the battery and made sure everything works. With everything working well, I begin combining the chassis, interior, and body into one car. Easier said than done with this car. I did discover a problem while doing this. I didn't realize that the dash-mounted tachometer was colliding with the windshield. The best solution I could come up with was to simply mount the tach on the steering column. No big deal, really. Once the tach was relocated, I assembled the car. The Firebird is already looking sick. The back end is up a little high due to the roll cage, but I'm not going to worry about it. This car is such a pain to work on, especially getting everything fitting together on the chassis, so I really have to pick my battles, and honestly right now, I'm fine with the back end sitting a little high up. With the interior in and the car put together, this Firebird is nearing completion. However, there are still a few more details that I wanted to add, starting with the exhaust. Keeping with the theme of this car, I wanted to add a very basic side-exiting exhaust. I got a few measurements and designed the exhaust using Autodesk Fusion 360. I also designed a rear bumper bash bar thing. The rear bumper I made before wasn't the best fit, so this new one should fit a lot better. Once the designs were complete, I printed each part. So I just remembered that I forgot to glue the fire extinguisher in the car, so I'm going to go ahead and real quick get it painted and then just use some tweezers or something to get it into the passenger side footwell. After all the parts were printed, I removed the supports and did some post-print finishing work. After that, I applied some primer to all the parts to provide some additional smoothing before painting. Finally, I glued each part to the car. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some flat black paint and paint some of the wires under the hood and on the undercarriage of the car just to kind of hide them, make them a little more subtle. And with that done, the car is now complete. The car turned out looking awesome. I'm very pleased with the result, and I love the ultra scale appearance of everything from the body to the interior and even the undercarriage. An all-around awesome car, and remember, it all started with a dirt cheap built model car that I got off of eBay. I definitely want to do another super scale build like this at some point in the future. As big of a pain as it was to build, the result is awesome. Of course, all that's left to do now is to do some driving. I've driven and talked about driving this car before in previous videos. It drives surprisingly well, however isn't much of a drifter. Regardless though, it's a lot of fun to tear around with and do some donuts. Unfortunately, my joyride got cut a little short when the rear axle broke. Back to the bench for repairs. But thanks for sticking with me throughout this build. It's been a long time coming, but the result is awesome. This car is probably going to be a little more of a shelf queen, but I do intend to drive it, work on it, and enjoy it just like with all my other builds. Maybe I'll make another video featuring this car in the future if I make any big improvements or modifications. I do have a Monogram 92 Firebird Formula model kit sitting on the shelf, which is identical to this car, so I might build that car up at some point in a similar manner, but with a different theme and maybe make it a little more practical while still retaining some great scale details. Of course, whatever comes next, I'll be sure to make a video, so stay tuned. Before I end today's video, I want to showcase some of the amazing projects and vehicles that have been showcased over on the Make It RC Facebook group. If you'd like to check them out for yourself or post your own cool projects or vehicles, you'll find the link below in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.